Some people return money because they are honest when life is easy. Clara Whitman returned $50,000 on the same night her daughter needed medicine she could not afford. She found the envelope at 2:18 in the morning, tucked beneath the velvet cushion of a penthouse sofa on the 32nd floor of the Harrington Grand Hotel in Boston. The room still smelled like expensive cologne, spilled champagne, and the sharp lemon cleaner she had sprayed across the marble bathroom counters. Outside the windows, the city glittered like it had never known hunger. Inside Clara's uniform pocket, there was $11.43, a bus pass with one ride left, and a pharmacy receipt folded so many times the paper had gone soft at the edges. Her 7-year-old daughter, Lily, needed her inhaler refill before morning. Clara had promised her she would get it after work. She had said it with a smile. Mothers learn how to make promises sound stronger than they are. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, sealed once but torn open at the corner. When Clara lifted it, the weight made her pause. Not because she wanted it, because she knew what that much money could do. Rent, medicine, groceries, heat. A real winter coat for Lily instead of the purple one with the broken zipper. She looked toward the door. The hallway was empty. The penthouse was silent except for the hum of the air system and the soft squeak of her worn shoes against polished wood. She opened the envelope just enough to see the stacks of cash inside. $100 bills. Clean. Banded. More money than she had held in both hands in her entire life. For a moment, Clara did not move. Her cracked fingers tightened around the paper. Her chest rose once, then again. Then she closed the envelope, pressed it flat against her uniform, and whispered the words her mother used to say when Clara was little and hungry, and watching other people have more than they needed. What is not yours will never save you. At 2:31 a.m., Clara walked to the front desk, placed the envelope on the marble counter, and told the night clerk it had been left in the penthouse. She did not give a speech. She did not ask for a reward. She signed the lost property form with a pen chained to the desk, adjusted the frayed cuff of her sleeve, and went back toward the service elevator like nothing had happened. But someone had seen everything. Above the lobby, behind smoked glass on the mezzanine level, Billionaire Grant Ellison stood perfectly still, with his hands in the pockets of a charcoal overcoat. He had watched her find the money. He had watched her hesitate. He had watched her return every dollar. And instead of feeling grateful, the first thing he felt was suspicion. In Grant's world, honesty usually had an audience, a motive, or a price. People performed virtue when cameras were nearby. People returned things when they expected more in exchange. He had built a fortune by trusting patterns, not promises, and Clara Whitman did not fit any pattern he knew. When she stepped out of the hotel at 6:17 that morning, the sky over Boston was still dark, the air cold enough to turn her breath white. She pulled her thin coat tighter and started walking toward the bus stop. Grant watched from the back seat of his black sedan. His driver, Miles, glanced at him through the rearview mirror, waiting for an instruction. Grant did not look away from Clara. Her shoulders were tired. Her shoes were soaked near the toes. She carried herself like a woman holding herself together by habit alone. Finally, Grant said quietly, "Follow her. Keep your distance." And as the sedan eased away from the curb, Clara Whitman had no idea that the man who owned the $50,000 was about to follow her into the part of her life she had worked so hard to hide. The sedan moved slowly behind Clara, never close enough for her to notice, never far enough for Grant Ellison to lose sight of her blue hotel uniform beneath the thin gray coat. Boston was still half asleep, wrapped in a cold morning mist that clung to the sidewalks and turned every streetlight into a pale yellow blur. Clara did not walk like someone who had just done something extraordinary. She walked like someone counting minutes. Her left hand stayed inside her pocket, holding the pharmacy receipt as if gripping it tightly enough might change the number printed at the bottom. Miles kept the car 2 blocks back, silent behind the wheel. Grant sat in the warmth of the leather back seat, watching through tinted glass, while Clara stood at the bus stop with 3 other early workers and a man drinking coffee from a paper cup. No one looked at her. No one knew that less than 4 hours earlier, she had held $50,000 in both hands and walked away from it. When the bus came, Clara climbed on slowly, using the rail because her feet ached from the overnight shift. Grant told Miles to follow. The bus crossed through neighborhoods that changed street by street, from polished storefronts and clean glass towers to older brick buildings with faded signs, cracked sidewalks, and laundromats already glowing awake. Clara got off near a corner pharmacy with a flickering green sign. Grant leaned forward. He had expected her to go home. She did not. She walked into the pharmacy with her shoulders pulled tight against the cold. Inside, the fluorescent lights made everything look too bright and too tired. Clara went straight to the counter and handed the pharmacist a folded prescription with Lily Whitman written across the top. She smiled politely. Not happily. Politely. The kind of smile people use when they are hoping not to become a problem. The pharmacist typed, checked the screen, and said something Grant could not hear from outside. Clara nodded. Then she opened her wallet. 1 $10 bill. 1 single. A few coins. Her fingers moved carefully, counting, stopping, counting again, as if another bill might appear if she looked long enough. The pharmacist's face softened. Clara's did not. She kept that small, careful smile in place, while the price sat between them like a locked door. $284.60. Grant read it on the register display through the glass. Clara looked down at the money in her palm. $11.43. The exact amount of a life stretched too thin. She asked a question quietly. The pharmacist shook her head with regret. Insurance would not cover it yet. No partial refill. No exception without approval. Clara nodded again, because women like Clara learned how to nod when the answer was no. She thanked the pharmacist. She actually thanked her. Then she folded the prescription back into her pocket, turned away from the counter, and walked toward the door without the medicine. Outside, the cold hit her face. For the first time all morning, her steps faltered. She stood beside the pharmacy window and pressed 2 fingers against her eyes, not crying loudly, not falling apart, just holding back the kind of tired that had nowhere safe to go. Grant watched from the sedan, and something inside him shifted against his will. The money she had returned could have bought that medicine hundreds of times over. It could have paid her rent. It could have changed the morning completely. But she had left it on a marble counter because it was not hers. Clara took 1 breath, then another. She wiped beneath her eyes with the back of her hand, straightened her coat, and began walking again. Not toward comfort, not toward rescue, toward home, carrying nothing but a promise she could not yet keep. Clara did not go straight upstairs when she reached the brick apartment building on Dorchester Avenue. She stopped beneath the rusted awning first, standing in the weak gray light of morning with the pharmacy receipt hidden in her fist. The building was 4 stories tall, old enough that the front steps had dipped in the middle from decades of tired feet. A trash bag leaned against the side rail because the dumpster was full again. The lobby light flickered behind the glass door. Somewhere inside, a radiator knocked like a tired machine trying not to give up. Grant's sedan stopped half a block away. Through the tinted window, he watched Clara stand there without moving. She looked smaller here than she had in the hotel, not because she had changed, but because this place made no room for dignity. The wind pushed at the hem of her coat. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny purple hair clip shaped like a butterfly. She stared at it for a second, then slipped it back carefully, as if even that little plastic thing mattered. Then she did something Grant did not understand at first. Clara turned away from the entrance, stepped beside the building, and leaned one hand against the cold brick. Her shoulders rose, fell, rose again. She was practicing her breathing, not for herself, for the child upstairs. Grant had seen executives prepare for hostile meetings with less discipline. He had seen attorneys rehearse before depositions, founders steady themselves before investor calls, politicians fix their faces before cameras went live. Clara Whitman was doing the same thing in an alley that smelled like damp cardboard and old rain. She was building a version of herself strong enough for her daughter to believe in. After a moment, she wiped beneath both eyes with the sleeve of her coat, straightened her name tag even though her shift was over, and forced her mouth into the shape of a smile. It did not reach her eyes. It was not meant to. It only had to survive the walk from the hallway to the kitchen table. She unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Grant did not follow into the building. Not yet. He sat still, watching the second-floor windows until one of them glowed warm behind thin curtains. Inside apartment 2B, Lily Whitman was awake on the couch beneath a faded quilt printed with yellow stars. She had pale cheeks, soft brown hair, and the kind of careful stillness that children learn when they know their mother is tired. A small plastic inhaler case sat on the coffee table beside a half-finished drawing of a house with blue shutters and a sun bigger than the roof. Clara dropped her bag quietly by the door and made her voice bright. "Good morning, Ladybug." Lily turned her head and smiled. "Did you get my medicine, Mommy?" The question was gentle. That made it worse. Clara crossed the room, sat beside her, and brushed a strand of hair away from her forehead. "They are getting it ready, baby. I have to go back later." Lily nodded like that made perfect sense, because she trusted her mother more than she trusted the world. Clara kissed her forehead and held the smile for 3 more seconds. Then Lily reached into the quilt and pulled out a folded napkin. "I saved you half my toast. You always say breakfast matters." Clara looked at the cold piece of toast, broken unevenly, wrapped like a gift. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Outside, Grant could not hear the words anymore, but he could see the silhouette of Clara sitting on the couch, one hand over her mouth, the other holding something small and white. For the first time in years, Grant Ellison felt ashamed of a test he had designed. Grant stayed outside the apartment building for 9 minutes after Clara disappeared behind the curtains. 9 minutes was longer than he had planned. He had meetings waiting, contracts waiting, a board call at 10, and an entire company trained to believe his time was too valuable to waste. But he did not move. He kept seeing the way Clara had stood in that alley, practicing a smile like survival depended on it. He kept seeing the pharmacy register, $284.60. He kept seeing the envelope on the marble counter, untouched, except for the fingerprints of a woman who had every reason to keep it. Miles looked into the rearview mirror once, then looked away. He knew better than to interrupt. Grant Ellison had not always been the kind of man who tested people with money. 38 years earlier, he had been a boy in Worcester, Massachusetts, living above a closed laundromat with a mother who worked breakfast shifts at a diner and evening shifts cleaning offices. Her name was Margaret Ellison. She wore the same black shoes until the leather cracked across the toes, and she packed Grant peanut butter sandwiches in wax paper because sandwich bags cost extra. She used to tell him that poor was not a character flaw. It was a weather system. You lived under it until you found shelter, but you did not let it tell you who you were. Grant believed her then. He believed everyone was more than what they lacked. But money changed the rooms he entered, and betrayal changed the way he listened. His younger brother, Peter, was the first person he ever trusted with a blank check. Peter had smiled across family dinners, called him Big Brother, promised loyalty, and quietly moved millions through shell vendors until the auditors found the pattern. It was not the loss that hardened Grant. He could make money again. It was the performance, the hugs, the birthday calls, the photographs on office shelves, the proof that someone could look like family and still treat trust as a door left unlocked. After that, Grant stopped believing in explanations. He believed in behavior. He believed people revealed themselves when they thought no one powerful was watching. That was why the envelope had been left in the penthouse, not lost, placed, measured, observed. A private test after months of missing jewelry, missing watches, missing cash from rooms owned by people rich enough to complain loudly. He expected disappointment. Disappointment was efficient. What he had not expected was Clara Whitman. He had not expected a woman with $11.43 to return $50,000 and then walk to a pharmacy where she could not buy her child's medicine. The thought irritated him because it did not fit the story he had spent years using to protect himself. Miles finally spoke softly. "Sir, should I take you back to the office?" Grant looked at the second-floor window. Behind the curtain, Clara's shadow moved across the room, small and tired, probably making breakfast from whatever was left. He should have said yes. Instead, he reached for his phone and called the Harrington Grand. When the hotel manager answered, Grant's voice was calm. Too calm. "I want the name, file, and shift record of the housekeeper who serviced penthouse 32 last night." Then he paused, watching the window as the first pale strip of morning sun touched the dirty glass. "And I want to know why a woman honest enough to return $50,000 is being paid like she is invisible." By noon, Clara had slept for less than 3 hours, and even that sleep came in broken pieces. Lily's breathing had stayed steady, but Clara still woke every 20 minutes to check the rise and fall of her daughter's chest beneath the yellow star quilt. The apartment smelled faintly of toast, radiator dust, and the peppermint tea Clara made when there was not enough milk for coffee. On the kitchen counter, the pharmacy receipt lay beside a stack of bills arranged in careful order, smallest amount on top, largest on the bottom, as if neatness could make them less frightening. At 5:40 that evening, Clara dressed for another overnight shift. Same blue uniform, same thin coat, same worn shoes with the soft split near the right heel. Lily sat at the small kitchen table coloring the blue shutters on her paper house, darker and darker, until the crayon began to bend. Clara packed a peanut butter sandwich into wax paper, then cut it in half and placed both pieces on Lily's plate. Lily looked up and asked if Clara was eating too. Clara smiled and said she had eaten at work, which was not true. The lie came gently because it had practice. Before leaving, Clara knelt in front of her daughter and touched the purple butterfly clip in Lily's hair. "I will be back before breakfast, Ladybug. You call Mrs. Alvarez downstairs if you need anything." Lily nodded, brave in the way children become when they have watched adults worry too often. At 9:42 that night, Clara entered the service door of the Harrington Grand Hotel and stepped back into a world polished bright enough to hide what it cost people to keep it shining. The lobby smelled of white lilies, expensive perfume, and fresh coffee served in porcelain cups. Her world smelled like bleach, damp wool, and the inside of rubber gloves. In the employee locker room, Vanessa Holt was waiting with a clipboard pressed against her chest. Vanessa wore a cream blazer and a smile that never reached her eyes. "You were 4 minutes late, Clara," she said. Clara looked at the wall clock. It read, 9:46. "My bus was delayed. It will not happen again." Vanessa tilted her head. "That is what you said last Thursday, when you asked to take a personal call during linen rotation." Clara lowered her eyes. "That was my daughter's doctor." Vanessa tapped the clipboard once. The hotel is not responsible for your personal complications. Tonight, you have floors 28 through 32. No delays, no excuses. Clara nodded because nodding was safer than explaining. Upstairs, room after room, weighted with unmade beds, empty glasses, wet towels, and the strange silence rich people leave behind when they depart. Clara worked quickly. She stripped sheets. She scrubbed sinks. She folded corners so sharp they looked measured. At 12:06 in the morning, she entered suite 3008 and found a diamond bracelet lying beside the bathroom sink, catching the light like a small line of fire. Clara froze. Not from temptation, from exhaustion. Trouble, she had learned, often arrived disguised as something valuable. She took one step back, then called housekeeping control from the room phone and reported it exactly where it was. But she did not know Vanessa was already walking toward that floor, and she did not know that one more test was about to turn into an accusation. Clara stood in the bathroom of suite 3008 with the phone still in her hand, watching the bracelet sparkle beside the sink as if it were waiting for her to make one wrong move. She did not touch it. She did not even lean closer. She had learned that poor people had to be careful around expensive things because sometimes the object was not the danger. The assumption was. 2 minutes later, Vanessa Holt entered with a security supervisor named Mr. Keene and another housekeeper from the floor below. Vanessa's heels clicked across the tile, sharp and slow. Clara stepped back immediately. "I found it right there and called it in," she said. Vanessa looked at the bracelet, then looked at Clara's uniform pockets. How convenient. Clara's face tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "I reported it as soon as I saw it." Mr. Keene checked his tablet. The room was marked cleaned 20 minutes ago. Clara shook her head. "No, ma'am." I had not started yet. I walked in, saw it, and called. Vanessa's smile thinned. "So now the system is lying too." The other housekeeper looked at the floor. Clara felt heat crawl up her neck. Not anger first. Fear. Fear because she needed this job. Fear because Lily needed that medicine. Fear because people who lived one paycheck from disaster did not get to defend themselves loudly. Vanessa picked up the bracelet with a white towel and held it beneath the light. "Do you know how many guests complain about missing items after housekeeping enters their rooms?" Clara swallowed. "I know how hard we work to make sure that does not happen." That was not what I asked. The words landed cold. Clara looked at the bracelet, then at Vanessa. "I did not take anything." Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel personal. "Women like you always say that until someone checks the cameras. Women like you." Clara heard the phrase clearly. So did Mr. Keene. So did the housekeeper by the door. No one corrected it. The bathroom smelled of lavender soap and glass cleaner. Too clean for a moment this ugly. Clara's hands curled at her sides, cracked knuckles pale under the fluorescent light. "My daughter is sick," she said quietly, "but I have never stolen from anyone." Vanessa gave a small laugh without humor. "Everyone has a reason, Clara. Rent? Children. Bad luck. That does not make people honest." Down the hallway, near the service alcove, Grant Ellison stood where no one inside the room could see him. He had arrived 10 minutes earlier, after receiving Clara's file from hotel administration. He had not placed the bracelet there, but when he heard the accusation forming, he did not interrupt. Not yet. Something in him wanted to know how far cruelty would go when it believed power was absent. Vanessa turned to Mr. Keene. "Document this. Pending review, Clara is not to service any occupied suites alone." Clara blinked once. "That will cut my hours. Then you should have thought of that before creating a concern." "I created a report," Clara said, her voice almost breaking. "I followed procedure." Vanessa leaned in. Procedure does not erase suspicion. The hallway went silent. Grant looked at Clara and saw a woman standing inches from humiliation, still refusing to raise her voice because the world had taught her that dignity could be used against her. Clara nodded slowly, not because she accepted the lie, but because she could not afford the consequences of fighting it. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered. And in that moment, Grant finally understood something he should have known the night before. The test had ended when she returned the money. Everything after that was not a test of Clara. It was a test of everyone else. Clara finished the rest of the floor under supervision, though supervision was too polite a word for what it felt like. Mr. Keene stood near every doorway with his tablet in hand, while she changed sheets, wiped counters, replaced towels, and emptied trash cans that smelled of room service leftovers and expensive wine. He did not speak much. He did not need to. His presence said enough. Every time Clara reached for a pillowcase or opened a drawer to check for forgotten items, she felt watched in the way honest people feel watched when someone has already decided they are guilty. By 1:38 in the morning, her phone buzzed inside her locker 3 floors below. She did not hear it the first time, or the second. At 1:52, when she finally stepped into the service hallway to refill her cart, she saw 8 missed calls from Mrs. Alvarez, the elderly neighbor who checked on Lily during overnight shifts. Clara's stomach dropped so fast, she had to grip the metal shelf beside her. She called back with trembling fingers. Mrs. Alvarez answered on the first ring. "Clara, honey!" Lily is breathing hard again. I gave her water. I sat her up. She says she is okay, but she is wheezing. Clara closed her eyes. The hallway suddenly felt too bright, too narrow, too far from home. "Put her on the phone, please." A moment later, Lily's small voice came through, thin but trying to sound brave. "Mommy, I am okay." Clara pressed her hand against her mouth. "Ladybug, listen to me. Sit up tall. Slow breaths. In through your nose if you can. Out through your mouth. I am coming." She ended the call and ran to the housekeeping office, where Vanessa was reviewing schedules beneath a buzzing fluorescent light. Clara did not explain from the doorway. She crossed the room with the kind of urgency that makes pride useless. "My daughter is having trouble breathing. I need to leave for 30 minutes. I will come back. I will finish everything." Vanessa looked up slowly. "You are already under review." "Please," Clara said, and the word came out smaller than she wanted. "I just need to get her to urgent care." Vanessa folded her hands on the desk. "If you leave your shift without authorization, I will mark it as abandonment." Clara stared at her. The room smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. Somewhere behind the wall, an ice machine hummed. "My child needs help. Your personal life does not change hotel policy." Clara stood there, still in her blue uniform, with cracked hands and tired eyes, and a phone clutched so tightly her knuckles hurt. For 1 second, Grant, standing just outside the half-open office door, thought she might finally break. Instead, Clara lowered herself onto one knee beside the desk, not as a performance, not for sympathy, but because the weight of the night had taken the strength out of her legs. "Please," she whispered, "I am begging you." Vanessa's face did not change. "Get up. You are embarrassing yourself." Grant's jaw tightened. Inside the office, Clara slowly rose, wiped her cheek before the tear could fall, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Then she walked back into the hallway, called Mrs. Alvarez, and gave careful instructions with a steady voice that did not belong to the fear inside her. She would not abandon her daughter. She would not abandon the job that paid for her daughter. So she did the impossible thing poor mothers do every day. She split her heart in half and kept moving. Grant did not speak to Vanessa that night, not because he lacked the power, but because anger would have been too easy. and easy things rarely change the truth. He stepped away from the housekeeping office before Clara could see him and walked into the empty executive lounge on the 31st floor, where the city spread beneath the windows in cold silver lines. At 2:24 in the morning, he called his private attorney, then his head of human resources, then the investigator his company used when contracts involved people who smiled too much. By 3:10, Clara Whitman's life was no longer a name on a shift report. It was a file opening piece by piece on Grant's phone, and every piece made the room feel smaller. Clara was 32 years old, widowed 4 years earlier after her husband, Daniel, died from a sudden heart condition while driving home from a construction job outside Quincy. No lawsuit, no settlement, no savings, just a hospital bill, a funeral bill, and a daughter who had started asking why Daddy's boots were still by the door. Clara had worked ever since: daycare assistant, grocery cashier, laundry attendant, hotel housekeeper. Never fired for misconduct, never disciplined for theft. Never late until Lily's asthma worsened that winter. Grant scrolled slowly. 4 applications for medical assistance, 3 denied for missing documentation, 1 still pending, 2 requests to the hotel benefits office asking whether part-time night staff could qualify for emergency coverage. No answer recorded. 1 payroll advance request denied. 1 note from Vanessa Holt marked attitude concerns after Clara asked to switch a shift for a pediatric appointment. Grant read that line twice. Attitude concerns. He looked through the glass at Boston glowing below him, then back at the file. There was more. Clara was 2 months behind on rent, not 3, because she had sold her wedding ring in January to cover 1 payment and keep the eviction notice from reaching Lily's hands. She owed the pharmacy $284.60 for the inhaler refill, but the previous month she had paid $40 in coins because the pharmacist had quietly held the prescription until closing. She had once slept in the apartment laundry room for 2 nights during a heating outage, letting Lily stay upstairs with Mrs. Alvarez because the couch was warmer there, and Clara did not want her daughter to know the landlord had stopped answering calls. Grant set the phone down. For the first time, the word poor felt too small. It did not hold the planning, the swallowing of fear, the careful lies told to children, the way a mother could turn $11.43 into bus fare, toast, and hope for 1 more day. At 4:06, another message arrived. Security footage from the penthouse showed Clara finding the envelope, opening it, closing it, and leaving without removing a single bill. Footage from Suite 3008 showed the bracelet already on the sink before Clara entered. The room had been marked cleaned by mistake from Vanessa's own office login. Grant leaned back in his chair, the old leather creaking beneath him. The truth was no longer hidden. It was documented, time-stamped, undeniable. And downstairs, Clara was still folding towels under suspicion, still answering calls about a sick child, still being treated like the problem. Grant stood, buttoned his overcoat, and looked toward the service elevators. By morning, the entire hotel would learn what Clara had returned. But first, they would learn what had been taken from her. At 6:08 in the morning, while the first guests were beginning to step out of elevators with rolling suitcases and paper coffee cups, Vanessa Holt called an emergency housekeeping meeting in the staff conference room behind the banquet kitchen. The room was narrow, windowless, and too cold, with beige walls, a long folding table, and a clock that always ran 7 minutes fast. Clara stood near the back in her wrinkled blue uniform, still smelling faintly of bleach and linen spray, her phone pressed flat against her palm in case Mrs. Alvarez called again. Lily had stabilized, but Clara had not. Her body was still at work, but her heart was home on that couch beneath the yellow star quilt. Around her, 20 employees gathered quietly, some in housekeeping uniforms, some from laundry, some from overnight maintenance. Nobody wanted to be there. Everybody understood the look on Vanessa's face. Someone was about to be made an example. Vanessa stood at the front with Mr. Keene beside her, holding a folder as if the folder itself were proof. "We have had repeated concerns about guest property," she began. "The hotel's reputation depends on trust, discretion, and professionalism." Her eyes moved to Clara. Some employees seem to forget that access is not ownership. Clara felt the room shift, not loudly, not visibly, but she felt it. People glanced at her, then away. That was how suspicion worked. It did not need evidence to damage you. It only needed permission. Vanessa continued, her voice smooth and clean. "Last night, an expensive bracelet was found under circumstances that require review. Until further notice, Clara Whitman will be removed from premium floors and reassigned, pending disciplinary evaluation." Clara's throat tightened. Reassigned meant fewer hours. Fewer hours meant no medicine, no rent, no way to hold the pieces together. She stepped forward slightly. "I reported the bracelet before I touched anything." Vanessa lifted one hand. "This is not a debate. I also have concerns about your pattern of personal disruptions, unscheduled calls, emotional behavior, and failure to maintain the standards expected at the Harrington Grand." Emotional behavior. Clara almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the only emotion she had shown all night was restraint. She looked around the room for one face willing to meet hers. Most looked down. One laundry worker, a woman named Ruth, had tears in her eyes but said nothing. Vanessa opened the folder. "Effective immediately, your shifts will be reduced while we conduct our review." Clara's fingers tightened around her phone. She thought of Lily asking for medicine. She thought of the cold toast wrapped in a napkin. She thought of $50,000 sitting safely in a hotel office while her own life collapsed over $284.60. For a moment, the room became very quiet. Then the conference room door opened. Grant Ellison stepped inside in a charcoal overcoat, followed by the hotel general manager, his attorney, and 2 members of corporate security. Vanessa's mouth parted before she remembered how to close it. Grant did not look at her first. He looked at Clara. She stood there, pale and exhausted, still trying to understand why a man from the mezzanine, a man she had barely seen, was now standing in the staff conference room before sunrise. Grant placed a cream-colored envelope on the table. Then he looked at everyone and said, "Before this meeting continues, you are all going to see what this woman actually did.